I'm always like, woohoo, podium. Yeah, that's a weird thing. So I'm Ismaeel Chartier. I am the Imam of the Clifton Mosque here in town. And my community is a mixed bag, right? My community is everybody. So my community is not just Arabs, it's not just Pakistanis and Indians, it's African Americans, it's Caucasian Americans, which I am, I'm Irish. It's people who are undocumented workers who are here. About 25% of our Muslims that live in the tri-state area are undocumented. They came here legally on work visas or student visas, but have since overstayed them because it beats going back to an occupied country with a dictator telling you what to do, right? So you'd rather take that gambit. So there's a lot of issues that are coming out of Washington that affect my community, that people don't necessarily always think of when they think of those marginalized groups. So even my community has a hard time accepting that there are undocumented workers within our community, even though it's their cousins and their nephews and their aunts and their uncles. The big one that came out that affected us directly was obviously the Muslim ban, or the flight ban. You can call it whatever you want, but when you say Muslims can't come in the country, but Christians from that country can, it's a ban on religion, and that's why it was struck down in 3 courts now. That's not the scary thing that's coming out of this regime for Muslims in America. The scary thing was actually introduced by Ted Cruz, and it's a ban basically on Muslim activism. So what it really says is that anybody who's a Muslim and a political activist can now be labeled a terrorist, which is very reminiscent of what happened to the Jewish community under a man that had a funny mustache and tried to rule the world. So those are the things that are really concerning for us. We are part of the sanctuary congregation movement. We had this press conference at our mosque where Clifton Mosque and Church Cathedral declared themselves to be a sanctuary congregation, meaning that anyone who was undocumented, anyone who was about ready to be deported after they've gone through a vetting process with us, which means that they can win their case, can come and stay at the Clifton Mosque, can come and stay at Church Cathedral. The reality is that I met with the Mesoamerican community, I met with Manuel and other people, and they really have told us that they realize that our saying this, that the mosque saying this, that the Muslims coming out and saying we stand with undocumented workers and refugees has no help to them. Because we're just as marginalized and a threat as they are. So there's a thing with ICE where they won't enter a church, a school, a synagogue, to take people out and forcibly deport them. You'll probably go into greater detail on that, maybe?
I can.
Okay. So there's a memorandum that says this from 2007, 2005, something like this. It's a long-standing memorandum, but the new regime doesn't really seem to think things are sacred, that are sacred. So I believe my mosque is a sacred space. I believe it has a sacredness to it. But when you argue that Islam is a political ideology and not a religion, then it becomes not a sacred space anymore. So people could have this idea of sanctuary there, but they realize in the long term that we're not safe. Since we've announced sanctuary congregation, I have received over 75 personal death threats from the northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area about this one thing. Over 225 churches nationwide have declared themselves to be sanctuary congregations, and 1 mosque, the Clifton Mosque. And in every paper, every article, everything that's written about it, it's about us, not about the 225. You never hear, Christ Church Cathedral did this. Like, that's not, they're like, and Christ Church Cathedral. And then this huge thing, and then all the comments about these Muslims need to have their building burnt down. So what's happening in Washington is actually going to cost us about $75,000 to do security in our building. Because we've had several threats against our building. And with the shooting in Quebec City of 6 men while they were praying, it's something we have to take seriously. So the rhetoric that is coming out of the White House, and I believe, this is just me, we can argue about this all day, I believe it's a white nationalist, white identity, white genocide, hopping up kind of white supremacist organization is the White House. That's what I think. And I have my reasons for this. They're really marginalizing and trying to scapegoat the Muslim. But I don't think we're the ones that are in danger. I don't think the Muslims are the ones that are in true danger. I believe we're a pathway to get to the Jewish community. And I meet with the Jewish community and we talk about this and they actually agree with me about this. That anti-Semitism is at an all-high in America. Hebrew Union College has been in this city for 142 years. 142 years. You know when the swastika was painted on the building for the first time? 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. 142, almost 143 years, not a single incident of fascism, not a single incident of neo-Nazism painted or otherwise given to them in any way from Cincinnati. 3 weeks after the election, they had their first swastikas drawn on their buildings. They've received multiple threats against their facility like we have. They have contacted the Fusion Center, which is a joint Homeland Security, Cincinnati police thing, where they actually have an emergency response plan that they've given to us. Now the response that I want to talk about, and I'm going to shut up because I know everyone has a lot better things to say than me, is the thing that people weren't counting on happening with all this neo-fascist rhetoric coming from the White House is that Jews and Muslims would come together. That we would take this idea that America is for religious minorities and that we would come together. My grandparents came here in 1952, but they didn't come here from the Middle East. They came here from Belfast, Ireland, and they were Catholics. And they came here because in their mind they were escaping religious persecution because they could not practice Catholicism in their country. So they came here to America so that they could be Catholic, they could be fully Catholic and have all of the rights of a citizen to practice their religion. So when I look at myself today as an Irish American Muslim, I am the dream of my grandparents. I am the reason they came here, so that I could practice my religion as a religious minority in this country. And the Jewish community has always fought to practice their religion in this country. Have always fought to practice their religion. Why is there a Jewish hospital in Cincinnati? Anybody know? Because we wouldn't let them practice medicine. We wouldn't let Jews become doctors in America, so they built their own hospitals. That's why there's Jewish hospitals. So we have a history of not really welcoming the stranger. Even though all of our religious texts tell us to welcome the stranger, to treat them like the citizen, to not look down on them. I was a stranger once in Israel, right? We were supposed to welcome strangers. I never thought that I would live in America where green card holders for this country are seeking asylum in Canada. Let that sink in just for a minute. That people who came to this country, who followed what it said on the Statue of Liberty, send us your huddled masses, send us those yearning to breathe free air, are now asking Canada for political asylum. That's not the America I knew. And granted, I have some privilege because I'm a white guy, but that's not the America that I knew. My grandparents didn't come to that country. They came to a country where they could breathe freely, where they could have grandchildren and children that would be free, that could live in a democracy, that they could have their own right to follow their path. They had a right, a God-given right, to be an individual in society and maybe different than everybody else, but that was the God-given right. Did you ever in your life imagine, and you guys are obviously older than me, did you ever imagine that there would be a time in America where people would be seeking asylum in other countries? Like realistically, did you ever? No, and that's the reality. I have friends that live in military dictatorships around the world who are some of the most oppressed people in the world. They send me emails and letters and call me on Skype and tell me to flee America before what happens to the Jews happens to us. That's what my community's up against. So as a response to this, we've reached out to allies. We've reached out like we've never reached out before. In the 3 years that I've been here in Cincinnati, we have reached out to every religious, political, socioeconomic, every group we could think of that would stand next to us if we stood next to them. And that's what we've done. Because we've made this a local response, we've made it if they attack you, they attack us. So if someone attacks the African American community, they attack the Muslim community. If someone attacks the Jewish community, they've attacked the Muslim community. If someone attacks women, they've attacked the Muslim community. If someone attacks the LGBTQ community, they've attacked the Muslim community. Because if they take one person's right, if they take one group's right, they take all of our rights. And for my community, it's special IDs, it's toxic internment camps, And we can all remember the last time a religious majority made a religious minority wear special IDs. They were yellow stars. And 6 million people lost their lives. Now, people say I'm an alarmist. They do. People say, well, you're an alarmist, that can't happen here. Germany was a liberal, educated, beautiful society prior to this. It was one of the most educated societies in Europe. And they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. We are not as educated as Germany in 1933. Our literacy rates are much lower than they were in Germany in 1933. Our political aptitude is much lower than it was in Germany in 1933. This is a reality that we must face, right? So, my community is literally afraid of extermination. So when I talk to people, they call me and they ask me, when do we leave America? When is this line in the sand where we leave this land and go somewhere else? That's horrible. That's horrible. That people who came here have to flee here. And this brings me to the idea of undocumented workers and where I kind of stand and I'm going to quit. When I was in college, I went to the University of Arizona. That's where I got my bachelor's and my master's degree from. And I worked at an old Chicago pizzeria, which I don't think they have in Cincinnati, but they're pretty big out west, right? And there was a guy there named Alfredo, and there was a guy named Guillermo, and there were all these guys that came up from Mexico that were working in our kitchen. We called it Black Monday. It was the day that ICE came in and took all of the people that worked in the kitchen, except for like me, because I was obviously I'm not Hispanic, and for other reasons I'm a citizen. But I asked Alfredo, I said, why did you come here? Why did you come to America to work? Because I wanted to understand this. I wanted to understand why someone would risk everything to cross the desert in the sun, to pay a coyote, to come here and all this. I asked him, why did you do this? And he said very simply, if I want to feed my family hamburger, just ground beef 1 time a week, it costs me $5. So I was like, that's not that bad. $5 to feed a family? He said, I make $5 a week. In Mexico, I make $5 a week. So me being the liberal format I am, I said, Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome to America.